When the continuous alarm bell sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. The designated exits are signposted. Arrangements are in place for the safe evacuation of disabled people.
Thank you very much. Apologies for absence and any substitutions. No substitutions. Councillor First isn't. Okay. That's fine. Okay, well, hopefully he'll be able to join us. Are there any declarations of interest? We already have one agenda item, so no declarations. Thank you very much. Item 5, there is no urgent business agreed by the Chair. And item number 6, there are no public or councillor statements. So item number 7 are the minutes, and you've all had a copy of the minutes from the last meeting. I understand that there was an issue with regards to microphone. So what we would like to do is we would like to defer those minutes, and we'll look at them in the next meeting. And we will add an appendix with all the questions and answers, so we've captured everything that was relevant from that meeting. Is everybody okay with that and agree with that? Great, thank you very much indeed. May I now invite the Cabinet Member, Councillor Davis, to update us on the relevant items going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm just going to do a brief update on the matters that currently sit under my portfolio. And just as a reminder, I'm temporarily covering an aspect of Councillor Samuel's portfolio, the resource portfolio, which covers finance, HR, and properties. With that in mind, it won't come as any surprise to you that, especially after last week's government announcements, this is continues to be an extraordinary time as we try and ascertain the impact on the various financial elements in society and the country at the moment. And we've got coming up, just so I can sort of give you a clear timeline of when this committee and Cabinet is seeing the next round of financial reporting papers. In the Cabinet in November, we've got the second quarter outturn report coming, as well as also the medium-term financial strategy, both coming to the November Cabinet meeting. The medium-term financial strategy will then come to this Scrutiny Committee, which I think is the 28th of November, I think, your November meeting. And as you know, that forms a bedrock and seeks to inform as we develop the budget for next year as well. I believe that last year, and it was certainly our intention this year, that the medium-term financial strategy would actually have come to the September Cabinet and then to your September scrutiny. But given some of the anticipation of some of the forthcoming announcements from government then and some of the financial uncertainties, that was delayed to November, sensibly, in my opinion, especially given that in the last week and the Council's finance team are now working through the implications of the announcements last week in relation to the energy cap that clearly affects the Council, the reversal of the national insurance increase, which has an impact clearly on our finances, and we are also currently out with the unions and they themselves with their members in consultation about this year's in-year employer pay offer, which will take effect from the 1st of April 22. And Jerry, I think I'm right in saying that's right. So this is the in-year pay award, which has gone to, this is the pay award made, which the unions have now put out to consultation with their members, and I think the deadline we're hearing back from the unions is October, isn't it, for the 21st of October, which will then take effect from the 1st of April 22. this year's payroll. So you can see there is still an enormous amount of uncertainty and changes with regards to the council's finances. But with those timelines, that will then put us in a good position when we come to November to be looking at, in particular, the medium-term financial strategy and the projection for the in-year financial outturn. So hopefully, whilst it was slightly delayed, you can see the sense in delaying it to November for consideration by Cabinet and also by this committee. Since the last, I was just looking back through the various single member and other decisions taken since this committee last met. There haven't been many out of the ordinary. You'll be aware that the leader signed off on a 340k grant for Cleveland Pools, and you may have seen their first big public event this last weekend with the pools. We've had the council tax rebate, the initial £150. That's all now being processed and received either directly into the bank accounts or as a credit to the relevant residents' council tax bills. So that was the earlier announcement in the year for the £150 council tax rebate. Later on this month, we have 117 Newbridge Hill, which is the council's first 7 units of council housing. That property is completes an exchange back to the council's ownership at the very end of this month. And I think those are the relevant decisions that have happened since the last time this committee met. I did just also, only because it's been something that I've been recently attending and I thought it was helpful to have an update, and I know it's an area of interest for this committee. The commercial estate, which you know has been an area of particular focus by this administration on trying to make sure that the commercial estate is run as successfully and profitably as possible. We are now in a position where any arrears on the commercial estate has fallen from a figure of nearly £10 million 18 months ago to just £2.5 million today, and incredibly strong new lettings. Since January 22, we've now had 23 new lettings of the commercial estate, over 50% of which are to independent retailers, which is exactly the type of narrative and action we want to be seeing. And we've got 12 months ago, we had 10 to 11% of our properties were as voids. We're now down to about 5%. So there's some really positive news there with regards to the commercial estate, and there'll be subsequent reports, I'm sure, to this committee. But I know that I know it's an area of particular interest, and it's an area that we've been putting particular focus on. So there's some really positive narrative then in that regard. But Chair, I think those are the main things I thought it was appropriate to update you on today, unless anyone else had any questions.
Great. Can I open some questions to the panel? Councillor Elliott?
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Davis. First of all, congratulations on the estate figures. That sounds excellent, the commercial estate figures. But a question about the... you mentioned that the unions had got an offer that they've taken out to staff. Is there much variance between that offer that they've taken to staff and what we budgeted for?
There is a variance to what we originally budgeted for, but it is being considered in the updated outturn projections for the year that you'll be seeing in the second quarter outturn report. So clearly we're going to be factoring that in.
Okay,
at that point.
Anybody else? Councillor Hughes.
Hi, just a quick question on the council tax rebates. So, as you're probably aware, this current round has been fraught with problems, this £150 rebates. I believe mainly software, but there's been a number of issues to do with people that don't pay by direct debits, and even those that do getting the rebates. And I think we still have quite a number that's will now move into this new system where it's automatically allocated to their bills. Are we confident now that if we were to have another round of council tax rebates in a similar or the same scheme, that we now have an infrastructure that can do that, that can deliver it?
My understanding going forward is that the commitment made by government is that the next round, so in particular the £400 round, is actually direct onto energy bills, not through the council tax rebate. So I don't believe there's anything, I could be wrong, but my understanding is there isn't anything suggested going forward that there's going to be a council tax rebate option for these cost of living support schemes. I think you will be aware that councils up and down the country were caught out by the government suggesting that this would be done in the way it was suggested in the first round. And I think you all agree that making sure that all the beneficiaries, so those are anyone in band A to D, were that it was right that the final, with direct debits or direct bank transfers not being able to be made, that it was right that the final thing was that a credit was just made to the relevant person's council tax band. Of council tax account, sorry, beg your pardon.
Councillor Davis and then Councillor McVie.
Not so much a question, but just a compliment to, I did put it in for the staff, but I had a resident, what made me think about it, where there were some problems, partly because she wasn't paying by direct debit and just changed with the 150 and how helpful the staff were. The first time, unfortunately, I forgot to ask the officer's name, but luckily when I got through the second time, by luck I had the same officer, so I got his name and was able to put through a compliment. But just, normally we say when things aren't going well, but particularly to thank whoever, well I do know it was, but the officers have worked really hard, I think, to sort out the problems.
Thank you.
I'll make sure that's passed on. Thank you.
That's also nice to hear when things go right as well as wrong. Councillor McVie.
Just asking a little bit more about these new lets. For example, how many of them would be retail businesses as opposed to, domestic houses? We have a particular issue in Keynsham about letting to people that don't actually pay any business rates. Is there any more you can tell us about those?
I can get the exact detail for you and forward that on. 78% of the new lets were retail lets, and they're going to be in a mature year, because clearly, if you're looking at the figures from January 22 onwards, we're partway through a financial year, but in a mature full financial year, it's nearly £750,000 of extra income coming from those 22 lets, but 78% were retail.
Very good.
Does anybody else have a question? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Sorry, on these new lettings, I mean, it's obviously very good news, but I'm assuming that the figures are down in terms of the pre-pandemic rates that we were letting at. Do you have any idea on average how much we've reduced the cost for these lettings?
I don't, and I'm not sure if that's even necessarily the case with these units. So what I'll do is I'll find that information, and I'm happy to make sure you're updated on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else got any questions? Right, so I do have one question, just some clarification around the new bridge 117. You mentioned there were council houses. Were they all social housing? Yeah, so, yeah, okay.
Sorry, beg your pardon. All 7 units will be for social rent.
Right, so that's 80% of market rate.
We are finalising our policy at the moment with regards to the rent, but it is tagged to the local, we'll be able to confirm that to the local housing allowance.
Okay, no, that would be interesting to know, yeah, because it's still very expensive in Bath, isn't it? Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? No? Thank you very much. I know I think you've got to get on.
Unfortunately, yeah. Thank you then.
But thank you very much for that update. So if we can move on to item number 9, which is our Quality Improvement Plan. Can I welcome a number of members of the committee who are here today? It's nice to see you. Thank you very much. So I'll hand over to Cherry. Right, okay, we'll hand over to Dina. Oh, sorry, Dina, you're going to introduce it. Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to say very much, which I'm sure will please many people, but, you know, we have this plan before you and covering equalities and what we really want to hear from is what your thoughts are on this, so we can take that on board and make sure it's absolutely improved. I'm sure there was other things I was supposed to have added on to that, but it's, you know, it is a work that takes into account the range of different sort of equalities areas that we have a remit to address, and that will obviously include all the protected characteristics, etc. So my input in this has been both as a member of that particular board panel and also as the chair of the Baines Council race panel as well. So I'm fairly sure I probably missed something very important there, Cherry, and I apologise for that. But now I'd like to hand over to Cherry.
Right, thank you very much.
Colleagues, what you should have in front of you is the report to you as a panel and two appendices. The first appendices is the full Equality Improvement Action Plan, and the second appendices is a diagram to help explain the different equalities groups that we have as a council. I wasn't intending to talk you through the report in any great detail, but of course we can. I think just to note the points that we have kind of drawn out in that covering report, this improvement plan has come out of the government's equality framework, which you have got a link for in that report. And this framework enables us to set targets on equalities where we need to, so it targets for improvement. We undertook a full audit back in during 2021, and that audit was reviewed by the Corporate Equality and Diversity Inclusion Steering Group, which a number of you are members of. That group is chaired by the Chief Executive, and that improvement plan has now been agreed. The plan gives us a strategic direction for our equality work and puts actions with timescales against it, so you can see the progress that we are making. So I think we're asking you as a scrutiny panel to note the performance of the council against those performance indicators below or within the plan, to give feedback on any of them currently being used, and to comment on any other areas that you think we should be considering for inclusion in that report. The objectives of the Equality Improvement Action Plan are firstly for corporate oversight to ensure that our strategic leaders are involved in the creation and ongoing review of our plan, to enable reflective practice within each directorate and across the work streams. And you'll notice the 4 themes of the plan are not directorate specific. They actually cover a number of areas, the whole work of the council, as you'd expect. To monitor our progress and to ensure that there is regular practice review meetings and a plan for each of those 4 sections and the 4 themes, and reporting to you and taking a report to council in November is part of that. Our equalities teams support this work, and some of them are here today as well to listen to the conversation. We have staff networks in place, and there is good attendance and engagement from those staff networks, and they feed into the plans they're part of. They have an equal seat at that committee, at our committee, and have a voice, a strong voice in the work that we're doing. If I highlight a few of the areas again in the report that's included, but across that first section around demonstrating leadership and partnership working, we have a race charter, and we have the panel that Dina mentioned, have regular meetings in place, have ongoing resources available for schools who sign up to the race charter. And again, I think if you want a further conversation and further detail about that, then please say. We are working quite hard with colleagues in procurement around advice and guidance and support in terms of our equality practice through procurement. Same for training, development and support. We work, again, across our different groups and across our staff groups to ensure that the training is the right training for the council. I wanted to show you, excuse me a second, just plug my computer back in, just a selection. We have a selection of videos that we've been working on as part of our wider recruitment work that I know many of you in the panel are familiar with, but just to highlight some of the work that we have been doing around recruitment, but also around promoting us as a flexible and diverse employer. So I'm hopeful this works. They're a minute long, they're really quick. I'll just show you a couple of them to help try and bring to life some of the work that we've been doing. So that's the first one.
I've been doing this role for about 10 years or so. I'm responsible for managing a number of contracts with commissioning services, and they are predominantly around vulnerable children, so I'm really passionate about the work that I do. I really care about the people I work for, working with children and families. You can see the impact that what we do has on them. Any small impact or positive difference that makes is really got to be worthwhile, and it's what keeps us all motivated. We're almost completed now. The Step Up programme, which is a diversity leadership programme that's run by Bristol City Council. I found it's really helpful to increase my confidence in the job that I do already, and potentially look for other opportunities in the council as well.
So that was just to give you a small insight into some of the work that we've been doing, both, as I say, on our wider recruitment issues, but also on our equality improvement action plan as well. You'll see in the report that we've identified a number of areas for development that, again, your feedback on would be very much appreciated. Just to highlight a couple of those. One, there has been a delay in our census data from the most recent census. It's a government, obviously it's a government return, so we are still waiting for that detailed breakdown around the equalities information of our local population to be able to think how we need to reflect that in terms of our workforce and our community population. But we hope that data will be out before the end of 2022, but we're not in control of that. But we are on standby for getting that and presenting that back through the next steering committee if we have it in November. That will help us to set those informed data targets. The gaps in employee data, again, you'll see in the action plan, we are working hard to address that. Again, so it's much easier to do the work that we need to do if we have good data and to help make those evidence-informed decisions. We are increasing the number and quality of completed and published equality impact assessments. The data informs us that there's been a decline in the completion of these. However, there is a drive across the committee and the steering group to rectify this through the following actions. So service managers have been working to identify and capture those equality-related issues in the medium-term financial strategy, They've been taking a systematic approach in identifying the corporate and cumulative effects of policy development and service changes to ensure that we identify where proposals, if implemented, could create disproportionate impact on people with protected characteristics, and therefore what we need to do to mitigate the effects of those. We've been developing our staff competency in completing those impact assessments in a thorough and robust way, updating our budget templates, the work that Councillor Davies was talking about, to ensure that those equality impact assessments as part of the budget setting process are completed and at an early opportunity to enable us to have those detailed conversations we need to have. And then just finally, to finish, in terms of our staff network groups, I've touched on those already. I think the input from those colleagues has been really positive and energising, I think, for all of us. And we held a session just last week to gauge interest in a women's staff network group. We don't have a women's group currently. We have 15 members of staff come along to that. I've had another 10 people email me just this week to say, I missed it last week, but I'm really keen to get involved. We are also about to do the same thing and gauge interest in having a carers network group as well. Both of these were feedback we received in our last staff survey and our points we need to action. So again, you can see how this work crosses both our people strategy work that I know you're quite familiar with, but also thinking about our improvement action plan as well. I think over to you for any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just congratulate you? I thought it was very well covered. I think your themes are very comprehensive. So, yeah, it was a very good report. If I may indulge as Chair, I just wondered if we could add maybe another column after your RAG column, so that we can see when you move from your amber and your red into green. I think that would be a nice visual for us as well, and hopefully motivate staff to see that we're actually moving towards our goals. And I have got some other things, but I'll let everybody else speak first. Does anybody else have any questions or comments they would like to give Cherry, and any feedback? Sally, Councillor Davis, then Councillor Hughes.
Mine's not much feedback on that, but just to, particularly as I know Tina and Chris are here, to thank them. I had maybe something we need to just make sure, when, in case it was a child who was going to a local primary, has been going there for a couple of years, it never came to my notice until the end of April, and by September, when they came back, they'd put in some ramps for the pavement so they could access the wheelchair. And it's something perhaps we check in school that they can get round and do everything. What we haven't really checked is actually, can they get on and off the pavement? Or in one case, in your villages, we don't actually have a pavement in the first place, but can they get off the road onto a pavement? So it was dealt with brilliantly once it came to the attention of the relevant people. I don't know whether it had been in highways tray, but whether they hadn't picked it up, or I don't know what had happened quite, but it might be something we need to just make sure that doesn't happen again. But it'd been going on for 2 years before I got hold of before I was asked to do anything. And I can't fault, once we were aware of it, the speed at which it was dealt with. And I know the school and so on were really pleased, but it maybe it's just something we need to just pick up, that, you know, it's fine in school that we can get them round everywhere, but can we actually get them into the school, off the road and in through the gate? So a particular thanks, though, to the people who dealt with it.
And can I just add a comment to that? Is there any way that we can be proactive in that? So it must be quite difficult with the inclusion to, a child comes to school in a wheelchair, as an example, and they can't get into the school. So it'd be nice to be a bit more welcoming, to be able to get into the school from day one. I don't know if there is any.
It was literally to get off the road onto the pavement.
Yeah.
To get into the school, everything was brilliant. But the very bit that, you know.
Yeah, so I think it's just something to be a bit more proactive. Yes.
So I've got two comments, and that's to echo Sally's point. Actually, as soon as officers were aware of the issue, So Chris Wilford here and Chris Major in Highways absolutely got it sorted. So very, very impressed by that. But I wonder also if it might be picked up in a piece of work that's coming on, which is around how children are getting to school. Obviously, Sally, you'll remember back in the day there were every school had a travel to school plan, and I think that's a piece of work that's it's being redone. I think more with the idea of addressing the climate emergency as its main driver, but actually I think wheelchair access and other access issues should be being picked up in that too, as long as we make sure that the questions that are asked actually do pick that up. But I was just wanted to pick up on a point that I've just been made aware of, that we are also looking to have some more direct, that's not quite the word I'm thinking of, but an access and equalities officer, or some sort of resource, thank you, for in the team. So actually it shouldn't be an issue that then falls between two stools, I think is the proper phrase, isn't it? Chris and Sam, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I think it's a good point. I think as we build the newer schools, fewer ones, obviously we build in the access issues, but as we still have a stock of mainly older schools, it's really important that we do think about those children. And normally what we do, as soon as the school notifies myself or the relevant SEND team officer, we will work with the school to try and make sure those adjustments are in place. But I think it's right that we look at those issues more strategically.
Yep, Chris Major in place is in the process of recruiting an access consultant and equality officer who is specifically looking at new build and renovation. However, is going to, I'm persuading them, whoever it is, that's going to be a corporate resource for us. In terms of access, for physical access we're talking about for buildings and for facilities, there are two different measures. There's a 50-metre ring around a facility if it's covered, so if you're not out in the rain, that's where you would look to see whether somebody can travel into a school or something, or a shopping precinct. It's 100 metres if they're outside, so if you're coming from a car park or from a bus stop or whatever. So encouraging always when we're looking at new build to ensure that there are sweet lines going from where somebody is likely to be dropped off to the entrance, and then once they're inside, of course, there's a different process. So there's quite a lot to consider when we're looking at new build, and I'm sure that 117 Newbridge has got all of that wrapped.
Let's hope so. Yes, that sounds very positive moving forward. Does anybody, Councillor Hodge?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I thought it was a really great report, and that you can see the structure and the plans you've got in place. I just have a few different, some small points, just in terms of trying to quantify the initiatives and the impact. So you've talked about trying to get the percentage of impact assessments done by departments, but that really only tells you how many impact assessments you've done rather than how we're meeting a target of equality, which I think is more difficult. But do you have any plans for how you can demonstrate that you've increased the percentage of disabled employees or made it easier for different groups to find employment? So those performance indicators I know are very hard to develop, but is there another strategy for that? And there's the other, just as a matter of interest, I noticed the financial reporting gets a red, it's not good enough, I suppose, for capturing equalities issues early on in the process in relation to the medium-term financial strategy. I just wondered why that was and what you're hoping they'll do better. And then kind of a more general point is that a lot of the strategies around communication and making things more accessible for people are focusing on digital solutions. And I wondered if there's a need for quantifying the need for non-digital formats, because a lot of problems with accessibility are people that can't access things online or by mobile phone, either for mental health or for physical reasons, impaired visual or dexterity, or they can't afford a phone, or they aren't able to update digital capacity. So there's quite a lot of them, although paper versions and alternatives are mentioned throughout, all the solutions seem to be mainly digital. And I just wondered if we're making sure we're addressing non-digital accessibility enough and have quantified that as well.
Councillor Romero.
Yes, I was just going to ask Juliet, actually, she'd come in on that last question, because I think some of the work we're doing around consultations, for example, might be of interest to Councillor Hodge.
Thank you.
So I've been working with a couple of organisations at looking at the way we consult with the public and our approach, and considering not only people that are not confident with using digital equipment, but also thinking about digital poverty, especially now. And one of the things that we're looking at is a more community approach with consultations. So holding an event, looking at actually what are the needs, the primary needs in the community. So considering having food available, hot food available, so there's a meal for a family. Having an approach where we have photographs, we have, rather than maps that may be confusing, we're looking at capturing verbal feedback as well as written feedback through the use of having iPads available so people can talk into it. And taking a stance from maybe looking at people that don't feel confident to read and write. So, and also for disabled access as well, so making sure the venue is accessible, it's familiar, it's inviting, and you've got equipment, you've got resources for children to interact as well, so they're able to use cars to demonstrate what it feels like in their neighbourhood, for example, and to capture that and to ask those really tangible questions. What does it feel like? So not only thinking about how, noise pollution, etc. It's the feelings, the inner feelings, and capturing that as well. Does that help answer some of the questions?
Yeah. And then I'm going to, I think, ask Cherry to pick up a point about the, or Samantha, I'm not sure which. You can fight it out between you if you want, for the first point.
I'm quite happy to come back in. Sorry, Councillor Hodge, did you want to say something? No, okay. Sorry, I was looking over your ideas, we're not helping. I'll do the questions in reverse. So you've asked about financial reporting and what we're hoping to do better. I touched on that in the introduction, but I think we have always done equality impact assessments around budget and savings. It's always part of the budget report as well. You always see that there. But I think in recent times it's become apparent, because of the nature of the financial situation in which we're operating, we need to look more closely at the cumulative impacts and not on an individual by service or by particular change. So to do more of that cumulative work. And we also need to do them earlier, so not doing the impact assessments after the decisions have been taken or the conversations have happened with councillors. We need to be doing the impact assessments now at the point at which we're contemplating the changes, so they help inform the decision-making process. So I think we need to just be better at what we have been doing. And then your first question, yes, it's the hard question, isn't it? Absolutely. And I think is a little bit reflected in the people strategy conversations we've been having. I know, I can't remember, but I know there's a challenge to me about producing KPIs and being much more data-driven, and I think that's a challenge for the council as a whole, for all of us, but I absolutely recognise that. So certainly with the work stream around the workforce, so theme 4, which is the one that I'm leading, our small group are going to spend a day together and really try and think about this with that census data to help inform what we need to do and try and get the balance right between quantifying what we need to do and setting ambitious targets, or at least
an ambitious endpoint to where we want to get to try and help drive some of the change, and then be able to quantify that journey. Because I think quantifying the change as much as having a KPI to get to, they're kind of equal importance, I think, to us in terms of the work we need to do. So we haven't done as much on it yet as we need to. It is very high on my priority list, both with my people strategy hat on and with the kind of equality part of that people strategy that needs to inform that, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. I just had one quickly. The census data that's so late that seems to be holding you back, why is it late? Is it just a COVID thing, the 2023?
Yeah, we don't actually know. I think there's two things. I was just talking to our data insight manager about it last week. I think it's a little bit COVID. They're also changing, in the process of changing systems. Again, they're government departments, that it's not controlled by us. But I think they're moving to a slightly different way of reporting for the future. So this is the last year of doing it in the old paper-based way. I think they're going to start using different types and different sources of data. I don't know any more than that. So I think it's just there haven't been as many of them working on it as maybe there might have been. But yeah, it's coming. We will certainly get it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Do any other councillors have any questions? Councillor Duguid.
Yeah, a couple of questions really. On that COVID question, how far do you think COVID has put us back? Are we a year or so behind where you would like to have been if we were having this discussion in 2019? I'm very interested in the gender payback data and the gap data and the fact that we've narrowed it, and benchmarking versus, looks like the country we're narrower than that. So that's very important. I just wondered, when issues arise in EDI, how well placed are we in the performance management review process to monitor it? Obviously, there are various ways that we can monitor EDI through official groups, unofficial groups, official discussions, unofficial discussions. I just wondered, in terms of the performance management review, are we far enough on that path where at a once-a-year appraisal, or more often, then issues like this can be discussed, and there can be a genuine two-way communication about people feeling that actually it's really good. I've had this opportunity and I didn't expect it, or I'm really disappointed. I haven't been put forward for this, and put that in an EDI context.
Okay, I'm just checking the other side of the room. How far did COVID put us back? Definitely a year, probably actually more, I'd say, in terms of a number of us were busy doing lots of other things, and this wasn't getting the attention and the time that it probably needed. I would say, though, I think we have an opportunity now to make up that time in some ways. We have, I think, a leadership team that's really committed to this. I think having the steering committee, again, who are really committed to this, really helps. And we have an energising equalities team that are moving the discussion forward and helping hold that senior leadership team to account to move this on. So where we may have lost a little bit of time through COVID, I'm very, I think, positive about the opportunity we now have to work on this at pace. When when issues arise that are EDI, so in terms of our performance management review process, we have moved away from an annual appraisal. We are having regular performance conversations. We have been at the council for some time, and we have, again, we're literally at the final point of implementing our new software to capture those conversations now, to give us better data and all of the other conversations we've had. So I can't comment on kind of individual conversations, but I certainly think we now have the facility to capture it and to be able to structure those conversations in a way that we maybe didn't have before. And we've got the management training, I know we have the management training to support that as well. I also think through our staff networks now, and I'm kind of looking over my shoulder a little bit, but those colleagues on the staff networks, they are partly there to provide challenge and to have some of these those challenging conversations about what happened in this instance and why is this the case and what does this data mean at a corporate level as well. So we're not just having them in a private performance conversation, we're having them corporately as part of our kind of corporate standards of working, corporate ways of working. So, and for me, I feel that conversation has really shifted in the last 6, 9, 12 months to a much more meaningful conversation now as well.
Can I follow up on that one? It's a surprise. So in terms of your networking groups, can I ask whether the equality, diversity and inclusion is now all beginning to be embedded into the culture? And how does somebody who finds it difficult to have those conversations at maybe that sort of corporate performance level, how do they go about raising those concerns? Can they go to the networking groups and get support from those networking groups, or are they relying on their line managers? Because not everybody will raise difficult issues with their line managers.
So I think so, and of course I would sit here and say that, so I feel like I'm speaking on behalf of people who maybe you need to test this further and elsewhere. Both anecdotally through conversations I've had with individuals, but also that we've had as a committee and as a group, certainly I know that colleagues feel able to share in those staff network groups, and the chairs of those groups in particular, both individually and collectively, are quite strong in their views and very direct and straightforward individuals and raise those issues. And we've been talking in our small workforce group about a couple of very particular things, and the chairs of those networks want to play them back to a number of us as senior colleagues and have them as meaningful conversations that feed into our action plan, certainly around the workforce one, but I know contributing to the other groups as well. I hope that colleagues feel able to raise issues with their line manager, but not always, and we know that sometimes the issues are with a line manager. We have an equalities team, some of whom are over here, which is why I'm pointing that way, but we have a wide peer support network as well. Some of that was a benefit, I think, of COVID in terms of bringing in different ways to support colleagues. We have a menopause group, it's mentioned again in the action plan for colleagues. Again, it's a different kind of peer support network where a female colleague may not feel able to have that conversation with a male line manager or a male peer, and they can have it in that group and get support from that group, and we can help and change that conversation. So I do feel that through those kinds of activities the conversation is changing. But we do recognise these are not always easy conversations to have, and we try and give people lots of different points and contacts to raise issues in if they wish.
Yes, so at the moment you're on that journey and you're moving towards that sort of enabling culture that people will feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Great, that's lovely. Thank you very much for that. Councillor McPhee and then... Yeah, please do.
Could I add some of the detail on the external work outside of the staff complement that we carry out in the equality team? The equality team is 4 days a week. That is one person. The way I think the question was about assurance, both for members of staff and for members of the public. So as well as the information that Cherry has shared, we've got a very good and functioning reasonable adjustment panel. So if there's a member of our staff who is either a disabled person or becomes a disabled person or has a life-limiting condition, health condition, they can talk with the reasonable adjustment panel that comprises legal, HR and somebody like myself, and maybe an expert in the field that they're working in, somebody maybe who knows about IT and things like that, where we can try to ensure that we are considering fully the adjustment they've requested of us to ensure that we're compliant with the law. We're positive about disabled people access to work organisation, and on top of that we've got policies on domestic abuse and domestic violence amongst our staff complement. So we've got domestic abuse champions. I know that's not necessarily an equality issue, but it quite often becomes conflated. We have the Independent Equality Advisory Group that comprises external representatives from groups who
are able to discuss with us as experts equality issues across all of the strands, and that meets, Dina attends very regularly, that meets every quarter, and Juliet chairs that on my behalf. We've got, as you've heard, the Corporate Equality Inclusion Steering Group Board, and we link in with public health, particularly at the moment, on things like their suicide prevention work and so on, all pertinent. Of course, we also link really strongly with the unions, and sometimes members of staff will share something with their union rep, and that union rep then gets permission from them to share it with me or my colleagues, so that we can give some extra support when needed. So we're trying to create a process where anybody feels that if they need assistance, there's somewhere that they can go. It isn't necessarily the Equality Service, but we can signpost them to help. And that sometimes is, of course, the Equality Advisory Service, the Employee Advisory Assistance Service that we have, who can provide some kinds of counselling and other sort of mentor support. So there's quite an awful lot going on behind the scenes that we don't necessarily see.
Yeah, no, excellent. That's great. Thanks for that, Sam. Councillor McPhee.
So I left the employment in about the year 2000, and I was a director and I had a HR department, and I don't remember hardly any of this there. If it was there, it was a set of things that were put there so that you said you'd got it. And I thought when I came to this report that I was going to find a set of pages, but what I got actually was something where I could see there was action, I could see there was interaction, and you were making progress. And, you know, it's like a world away from what I was used to, and very impressive for that. What about, speaking of someone in the mid-70s, what about age? Is that here or not? In diversity?
Absolutely it is. Have I got the number off the top of my head? Around a third of our workforce, I can't give the exact number, is 55 and over. So for us as an employer, when it comes to thinking about supporting health, well-being, supporting career opportunities, thinking about succession planning, it's a significant issue for us in the broadest possible way. Again, that's just focusing on our staff. I'll kind of acknowledge that there's the wider work we do with the community there as well. We haven't got a specific staff network group for older workers. We haven't had that kind of raised with us as an issue. But actually thinking about it, setting up a carers network, again, it affects all our networks, in fact, are kind of age blind to a degree, but we know that certain issues are more affecting our older members of our staff. So no, age is, I think, threaded throughout the work that we do, and in fact often it's one of the protected characteristics, isn't it? And without kind of balancing them up, we've focused specifically on gender, ethnicity, obviously kind of a very important key issues for us to act on. But yeah, age is absolutely part of the conversation that we have here. Did you want to add anything, Samantha? No.
Very good.
Thank you for your feedback. I really appreciate it. It's a huge effort, a collaborative effort, but particularly colleagues
impressive.
Thank you.
So it almost reminded me of a spider's web, because you've linked up everything, and you've got different layers on it, which is lovely to see, and obviously hopefully hits everybody in the nicest possible way. Touches everybody and links into everything. So that's great. Yes.
Thanks very much. Just picking up on that point, I think this is a really ambitious and a very exciting piece of work, so congratulations to all concerned. I just had a couple of little questions. One was under the heading, we make sure members and officers are trained. And I was really pleased to see that there's a strategy in place for induction training, and including mandatory equalities training for elected members next time around. I think that's a really positive move. But the wording in the left-hand column I thought was quite interesting, saying that the LT and MT group had an opportunity to attend AR training, and members have been encouraged to complete LGA online equalities training. And I remember when we were being encouraged to complete it some time ago, and I was I'd be interested to know what the uptake was, if we're able to say that. And the second point, a little bit further on, if I can find it. Yes, the need to support political groups to undertake outreach to increase diversity of candidates, particularly in relation to ethnicity in the run-up to the next election in 2023. That strikes me as being a really interesting ambition and a very praiseworthy ambition, but it may be difficult to work out where the interface lies between the administrative function and the democratic mandate, and whether there's a risk of people who wish to do so identifying that as interference in the electoral process. Just interested in any thoughts on what the approach might be. Thanks.
Thank you. On your first question, I don't know what the uptake is off the top of my head. I'll find out, and I will certainly let you know. And yet, I think we reflect on the point about opportunity versus mandatory training for our leading together and managing together cohorts. In terms of your second point around political outreach, so the council member who's the member advocate for ethnic minority members is a member of the Corporate Equality, Diversity, the steering group, and we have asked that member to come and give an update to the steering group in terms of an LGA training programme that they've been given permission to attend. So I think there's some work there. It's not directly related, but I think there's some work there that might be a really useful feed into that group. But I'll let Dina.
Just going to caveat if you can caveat an expectation on who took the training up, because if I remember correctly, there were some technical issues. So the willingness to be trained might be more important or more relevant rather than those who actually managed to get through the training. But I'm fairly sure that was right, but it was a little while ago when that training was first being put forward. And yes, absolutely what Cherry was saying about that feedback, that is an expectation. And obviously we'll see how helpful that is in developing a plan for future training for all councillors.
And sorry, can I just add a point there? Because you used the word interference. I think that it's a difference between being led to different diverse groups. Each political party has its own processes in place anyway. So rather than interference, it's almost like a networking system in terms, that'd be fair, but it's a networking system. And you still have your candidates coming through, and you still have your selection process. It's just opening up those areas of diversity that we wouldn't normally necessarily be able to tap, and to give other people an opportunity to look at becoming a ward councillor. So I think that's what it was, rather than any diktat.
Which is, I think also, it's about finding different mechanisms to have a councillor body that actually reflects properly the population. And it's, so it might seem like a slightly unwieldy instrument, but it is one of a number of tools, opportunities that I think we should all, as members of political parties and consider when we're looking at the future makeup of councillor group body.
Lovely. Does anybody else have any questions? Fantastic. That's great. Well, thank you very much for that. That was, I think we've got some very positive feedback, and maybe a few things that we might like to see as suggestions for improvement. So that item is now ended, and we now have item 12, which is our work panel.
Can I just say one thing about that? It has now been updated. The Soma Valley Enterprise Zone is being put back, and the medium-term financial plans is on the November.
sorry. 28th of November, then we've got economic development update, Invest in Bath and North East Somerset, and then we will have the medium-term financial strategy, which means that the Somer Valley Enterprise Zone will be moved to January. We've got the budget scrutiny in January, so that's going to take up most of our meeting, I would imagine. Well, we've got one representative from the Somer Valley, so Councillor Hughes to move the Somer Valley Enterprise Zone from the 28th of November to January.
Is there a choice?
No, well, no, not really, but... and then in March, we've got emerging digital data and the parish charter, and that will be our last meeting before the election. So we'll be in Purdah after that. Is there anything else that anybody... Councillor Duguid.
I think the January meeting, I'm just worried whether we've got enough time for the summer plan, because normally the January meeting is solely about the budget, isn't it? Mm. I mean, we've got a bit of time in March, haven't we? I think we'd do it more justice in March, myself.
Parish charter's quite big, though. Kerry, can you...
I think the thinking is the report will go to Cabinet in February, so we were going to have the opportunity to scrutinise before it goes to Cabinet.
Right.
So it is a very important point. It is one of our enterprise zones outside Bath. Does anybody have an issue if we try and put in an extra January meeting? How do we feel about that? Councillor McPhee.
Well, there's some things we were talking about beforehand, weren't there, about the troubles that we've had with enforcement. So we had another meeting, we could have the Somer Valley, and we could perhaps address those resource problems.
Mm-hmm. That will have to go through our form. We have a process, so we'll have to put that through. So, Councillor Hodge.
I just wondered, is there a reason why we don't have a meeting in December rather than January? Or is there an additional, or is it too much of a rush? I was just thinking a meeting in December rather
Well, it was going to be ready for November, so...
Yes.
I think it's only being moved because we've got the medium-term financial strategy. Oh, have they? Sorry, I didn't pick that up. Apologies. Right, so...
All I was saying was rather than an extra meeting in January, have one in the month when we don't have a meeting.
Right, so I'm going to propose that maybe we have one in January, an extra one in January, to look at Somer Valley Enterprise, and then look at potentially any resourcing that comes out when I've completed the form. Yeah? But that, how do people feel about that? She says very touchy-feely. Would you? Is that all right, Councillor Hughes? Has anybody got an issue with that? No? Because then at least we'll do them both for the subject's justice.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So is that all right, Nico? If we could put that in, that would be great. Not that I want more work in January, but that's fine. If there isn't anything else, then thank you very much for being here today, and thank you very much to our officers, and welcome, sorry, to Kerry, who's first meeting. Apologies for not welcoming you at the beginning, but as they say, better late than never. So I shall now close the meeting at 5:10. Thank you very much. Right.